Okay, so like, why were the former employees not enrolled beforehand?
The employee was terminated because it was mandated that people still had to have insurance. So
Yeah,
we gave the option to sign up for Cobra insurance.
yeah.
Basically, once the person has been terminated or anything like that, or laid off, they are given the option to enroll into Cobra.
Okay,
So
okay,
they
that
don't
makes sense.
necessarily have to. If they
Yeah,
choose, then we would enter in all their information onto Cobra, and they would go still collect, or not collect, but they would still have health insurance through Cobra, but not us. So
okay,
we would
yeah,
provide Cobra with all their information.
yeah, okay, that makes a lot more sense now. Yes. Can you quote an instance where you went above and beyond your role to help an employee in need of urgent healthcare uh,
Um,
through your assistance?
yeah. So basically, like it was this something that I saw a lot when somebody was just in need. Like for instance, this person was in an accident and they no longer had insurance through their other like their other employer, or they're off their parents, so that would qualify as a qualifying event. So in that case, I would urgently enroll them into our insurance plan to make sure that they're taken care of.
Okay.
And then
Uh,
in some cases, we would have to backdate their pay to
yeah,
ensure that they did have insurance, and we could show the healthcare or provider that they did have health insurance and they have been paying for it. And the same goes for, like, for instance, for somebody that has to go see the dentist or something like that. And in many cases, a lot of them don't have not necessarily us, but the provider does not have their information, but they have
yeah.
been paying. So I would keep in contact with the um, the dental plan, whatever they would have at that time, and ensure that they send me that card so I could go ahead and make sure those employees are taken care of.
Okay. All right. Like, was there ever an instance where, for example, an employee urgently contacted you that you mentioned
So
that for
yeah,
the yeah, so
yeah,
like anything like that, it was a very urgent thing, and you just like quickly
yeah,
responded and went out of your way to help them out, and then took care of
yeah.
the
We
rest of the.
would Right. We would do that. Like, and if they had to go see and there was no time to waste,
Yeah,
we basically would take that information and then the company would go ahead and pay for it. But then we would
yeah.
send the billing information to the healthcare provider or to the dental provider, and then they would go ahead and take care of all that just to make sure that the employee is okay.
Okay. All right. And then for the assistance part, you mentioned that you provided support with general HR inquiries from 1,200 employees. So, what was the nature of the inquiries over here, and how was the support extended? Like, what medium did you use?
The same. It's basically the same thing. Like people are wondering, like about their, like, are they eligible for benefits? Are they eligible for, like, what type of leave are they able to take? Because like a lot of
Yeah,
people don't know that. Okay, they have some type of health condition that they could actually take a leave of absence. So I
yeah.
just make sure that they know their rights, and I would communicate with that with their managers or whoever it may be, so to make sure that they have a clear understanding of what their rights are as well.
Okay. That makes sense. And the medium that you guys usually use is by email and in-person visits, or just email and calls.
That one's specifically email and call, yes, because a lot of it
All right.
was remotely,
Yeah.
in New York or and stuff like that. Um, we generally didn't really deal with much of the in-person ones. So I mean, I would prefer it that way, but um, remotely is fine as well.
Okay. So for the verification part, you mentioned that you completed various requests as for unemployment and verifications while
Uh-huh.
providing all relevant documentation. So how did you manage to improve the number of favorable rulings? What procedure
Um,
did you deploy?
basically I was on top of keeping making sure that I have all the information correct. For
Okay.
instance, for example, like this person was late a significant amount of times, and
Yeah.
then we that was in due to in terms of us having to terminate that associate. So we would have record keeping of all those instances where that associate was late, or for instance, like for that, I'm just saying for this in particular, and we would have documentation of that, and we would have it in the HRIS system with all their coachings, and we would have it on the shared drive, and I would provide them with all those coachings and write-ups. Or, if, for instance, if they just stop showing up for one as well, and that's more of job abandonment, and then I would show them that I would provide them like the information, like this associate stop showing up, and then I would email or provide them with like the emails from the managers or the district managers, providing the proof of that.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
And a lot of times we had video footage that we would save, and we would provide
Yeah.
the police reports or stuff, anything like that, to the unemployment office, and then that way it just gets taken care of right away.
So you did due diligence at your part, right?
Correct.
Okay. So what was the number of favorable rulings that you secured ever since you were on?
I basically improved that. I want to say about 80%, because there was, well, actually more than that, because there was probably no, before I came there, nobody was taking care of it. It was basically just piling on,
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
because it was just hard for them to retain people in
Yeah.
HR because of how
Yeah.
much of a workload it was. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so I don't know, I can't really give you an accurate number on that, but I know it's pretty significant amount.
Okay. So
And
if you mention,
I know that had to save them at least. Well, I know at probably a year, probably I would say I at least 100,000 in unemployment, because they're
oh wow,
thinking, yeah, because we would have periodically, I would say about 10 to 20 a week,
yeah,
and this is people filing for unemployment, and nobody was taking care of those issues, because if you don't respond to the unemployment, then basically they're taking it as you're accepting the conditions, and you're having to pay them
yeah,
basically 40% of what they are actually making, and you multiply that by however many weeks there are in a year of nobody taking care of that. So yeah, that's why I say I can't really provide you an exact number, but I know it was a very
yeah. The
high
saving,
number.
the saving part is really nice. The figure that you quoted, and I can I mention estimated amount like 80% plus, or just round
Yeah,
about
that's
80%?
fine.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
that's
fine.
good. All right. So yeah, for the recruiting and interviewing part, what were the sourcing channels that you most commonly use? You mentioned that you used LinkedIn, you used Indeed, and other than that, did you use any other platforms? Did you use any, for
Sometimes we
example,
would go through a
universities,
staffing
career
yeah,
offices?
sometimes we would go through like a staffing agency besides like
Okay.
LinkedIn or Indeed.
Yeah.
And we would go through them, and then like for instance Robert Half was one of them. And then we
Oh,
would recruit from there, and then if we ended up liking them, we would just keep them on board.
okay. Okay, that's great. Because yeah, I just wanted to know if you guys interacted with other agencies, because that adds more flavor to your role. Okay, so you also conducted interviews. What sort of techniques did you use while conducting interviews to ensure that you hire the right fit? Was that behavioral interviewing? Was that like? Can you just share a few tactics?
I
Uh,
didn't really have. I just tried to see if they would be a good fit for the overall culture, not
yeah.
for the company. Because
Okay.
honestly, like we wouldn't be able to tell just. I mean, you could look at their resume, so I would just ask them basically questions about their resume, kind of like what you're doing, like what you enter, kind of like what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
I would just
Yeah.
ask them for more clarity on what they actually did,
Yeah.
and then how confident, and then you kind of get a feel of how confident they felt during while doing the interviews, basically, and going over
Okay.
questions I would have for
So
them.
So like, was there any approach like behavioral interviewing tactics or pressure situations? Like, did you sort of use that while
Yeah,
interviewing?
yeah, basically like having them tell us like a certain scenario or
Yeah.
position that they were in, and basically what they did for the company and what they think they can do for our company.
Okay.
Basically, seeing what they have to offer to us.
So, did you use the STAR approach uh, while interviewing the situation, task, action, result approach, or shall I not mention that?
No, I wouldn't mention that because we didn't really we there wasn't really like an approach to it. We kind of just
Yeah.
conducted how we feel like the depending
The,
on the position.
okay, for the general flow, however it went, right?
Yes, perfect. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and can you like quote a number for the like, for example, the number of people that you personally interviewed and brought on board? What was their retention percentage? Like,
Uh, I
how
mainly
successful were those candidates that you hired, basically?
um for because I mainly did the corporate office. I
Yeah,
interviewed one, two, I want to say about eight or no, probably 10 candidates.
yeah.
Um, no, actually more than that. Sorry, probably about 20 candidates. And I
Okay,
would probably say the people that they're still on board with us, except for IT. The IT was probably the only person that had left us for a better position. But
okay.
pretty much people are still there with the company. And it was for
Wow,
about six different positions in the company.
that, that's
Five or six
yeah,
positions.
yeah. Okay, that's a really impressive number. I'll be sure to mention that. So for the HR management training part, so you held training and coaching sessions with the management. So what were these training sessions about, and what was the audience size?
The audience was no bigger than because we would have to do this over Skype for Business.
Yeah.
Um, and it was no bigger than five people at a time, but we would
Okay.
conduct at least three of them probably a week.
Okay.
Basically, it's going over like questions when conducting like an interview, what people are allowed and aren't allowed to say,
Yeah.
and we would go over sexual harassment. That's one of the things, or how to handle certain employee relations
Yeah.
and like things, basically protocol of how they should handle certain situations.
Okay. And what was the training effectiveness rate, basically? How effective were the training sessions?
I would say is very effective. This is something that the company did before
Yeah.
I was even there, and I felt like it helped improve. Not only it provided more clarity to the managers
Yeah.
what their roles were, and it helped prevented us from being sued or anything like that during the interview process. Because a lot of people don't realize like basically even like writing notes down on a resume
Yeah.
can be extruded as like basically you could sue them for that. Um, I don't know the legalities of it, but I've
Yeah.
seen
But
court cases where people get
yeah.
sued because of that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we are done with this position. Do you have anything more to share for this one, or shall we
No,
move on?
no, that's about
Okay.
it.
All right. So for the last position, you acted as a personnel service manager at Sam's Club. Um, okay. So first of all, for this role, uh, service manager might not be that clear. So
Okay.
can I write personnel manager only?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So
Or you
yeah.
could just leave
Okay.
it as personnel if you would like, because that's what they
Yeah.
called it basically. Because yeah.
All right. So okay. So that makes sense because like the service manager could be a little misleading. So
Okay.
yeah. Okay. So personal only personal is, I think, good enough.
Okay.
So okay. So for like then again, like we did for the past two positions, can you just briefly describe what the role was about? What were your day-to-day responsibilities?
Basically, I was the point of contact for any HR related. Like if somebody needed to take a leave of absence, or if somebody had some employee relations issues where about another employee or the manager, they
Yeah.
would I would be the first point of contact with that. Or people would sometimes would leave a we would have a notes card where somebody would leave a card, and then basically I was the only one that had access to it, and I would just
Yeah.
keep in contact with them or schedule something with them, because it was in retail, so like the schedules are always changing. Um,
Oh,
and I did like the orientation when people would come on board, or if somebody would let go, I would take care of that as well. But also, I would just create. I was also in charge of the company's culture, making sure that people felt welcomed, basically, so they had a good feeling about the company, like the morale of the company, basically.
okay. So you mentioned the letting go part that you handle terminations as well. Can you describe how you went about that? Like that's a very difficult taxing procedure, right? Obviously, it's not easy being the person at the other end who's actually telling to the person that you are terminated. So how did you ensure that you maintained your composure through this difficult process, and how did you ensure that the decision that you made was the
Uh,
right one? How did you ensure accuracy
like for the employee relations.
for the terminations that you had?
Basically, I just kept it as professional as possible, making sure that they had a clear understanding of what was actually going on.
Yeah. Okay, so in terminations, basically, you get to see a lot of unexpected reactions, right? People either they break down completely, or they get aggressive, or stuff like that. So, did you encounter
Yeah,
such
I've
situations?
yeah, I've had cases like that. I've had people, not against necessarily me, but I
Yeah.
made sure that they had a, like for instance, if somebody was to break one of the rules, basically I would just have a conversation with them and explain to them exactly what they did wrong,